Recently, I received an email with an inquiry asking for advice about, well, what the matter was is that a devotee was doing some project for which he wanted to get some funds. He needed quite a lot of money, some internet project. And he thought, well, people aren't likely to send money. Devotees. The devotees aren't likely to send donations for that. They might get something. But if I collect in the name of food relief, food distribution, and cow protection, then I should be able to raise the requisite funds. And what did I think about this? And I replied, here's my reply, the email. Short, just 2 lines. Honesty is the best policy, especially when dealing with devotees. This is a case of Preya and Shreya, and in the long term, you will be happy if you choose Shreya. So for those of you who are not familiar with these words, these are important, well-known words, Preya and Shreya, Preyas and Shreyas. Well-known among followers of Vedic culture, learned followers of Vedic culture from the Kathopanishad. Preya means that which is immediately agreeable to us. And Shreya means that which is for our ultimate benefit. And they're usually not the same thing. What we immediately want often turns into something that we don't want. And that which we don't want, we may not like to accept austerities or controlling the senses, but that will be good for us in the long term, especially if that is focused on Krishna, becoming Krishna conscious. So this reminds us of the verses from Bhagavad Gita in which Lord Krishna speaks about happiness in the mode of goodness. Might seem like poison in the beginning, but nectar in the end. And conversely, happiness in the mode of passion seems like nectar in the beginning, but eventually turns into poison. So especially in dealing with devotees, if we don't try to hoodwink them, that will be better in the long term. Immediately we might get money from them, but we won't feel satisfied in our heart unless we're a crook or we have a kind of crooked mentality. And it's likely to boomerang on us. That they'll find out and they'll be upset, and then no one will give us any donations, and our reputation will go down, and yeah, like that. It won't be very good. So, just reading here from one of Srila Prabhupada's purports to his glorious Bhagavad Gita as it is. He writes, simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. That seems to be a very difficult thing. But if we can't reveal the real truth even to a devotee, then what to speak of an enemy? If we can't reveal the truth to a devotee, then we're not fulfilling Krishna's desire for us, as he states in Bhagavad Gita. However, here's another quote from one of Srila Prabhupada's purports in the same glorious Bhagavad Gita as it is. Srila Prabhupada writes, for a kshatriya or administrator, there are so many abominable things. A kshatriya has to be violent to kill his enemies, and sometimes a kshatriya has to tell lies for the sake of diplomacy. So that's for kshatriyas, respected members of Vedic society. And Srila Prabhupada is making this point to demonstrate that in real life, in the real world, we sometimes have to do things which are seemingly not proper, but still we should do them according to Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita. If we require to do, if we have to do the needful, even if it's not always seemingly the best thing to do. What about devotees? Can they be diplomatic? Well, okay, let's read from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Madhya Lila, chapter 12, text 45. Rajamantri Ramananda Bebahare Nipun Raja Priti Kahi Drabailo Prabhurman. Sri Ramananda Rai was indeed a diplomatic minister for the king. His general behavior was very expert, and simply by describing the king's love for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he gradually softened the Lord's mind. I won't get into the background of this. I'll just go straight into Srila Prabhupada's purport to this verse. A diplomat in the material world knows how to deal with people, especially in political affairs. Some of the great devotees of the Lord, like Ramananda Rai, Raghunath Das Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, and Rupa Goswami, were government officers and had a background of very opulent householder life. Consequently, they knew how to deal with people. In many instances, we have seen the diplomacy of Rupa Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, and Ramananda Rai implied in the service of the Lord. When Raghunath Das Goswami's father and uncle were to be arrested by government officials, Raghunath Das Goswami hid them and personally met the government officers and settled the affair diplomatically. This is but one instance. Similarly, Sanatana Goswami, after resigning his ministership, was thrown in jail, and he bribed the attendant of the jail so he could leave the clutches of the Nawab and live with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now we see Ramananda Rai, a most confidential devotee of the Lord, diplomatically soften the heart of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, despite the fact that the Lord definitely decided not to meet the king. The diplomacy of Ramananda Rai and entreaties of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and all the other great devotees succeeded. The conclusion is that diplomacy used for the service of the Lord is a form of devotional service. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? Diplomacy is considered, if we say someone's being very diplomatic, we mean they're not being very straightforward. But Srila Prabhupada writes here that it can be used in Krishna's service also. I'm now going to read a section from a book that I'm working on about Srila Prabhupada's mission and his instructions for his disciples and for ISKCON. This section is called Integrity. And this specifically comes to the point that's been asked about and which I was asked to elaborate on further, which I'm doing now. The point of not being straightforward in soliciting donations. Oh, by the way, no doubt whoever had the idea to do this would have had some food relief and cow protection if they were to collect for that, but it would have been not all for that. The real aim was to collect for something else. Okay, so here's the section in my upcoming book on integrity. Although Srila Prabhupada stated that diplomacy used for the service of the Lord is a form of devotional service, in one area he insisted that honesty is the best policy. It's a well-known saying that Srila Prabhupada quoted at least once. This was that money contributed for a specific purpose be spent for that purpose. Stating, I must be satisfied the money is properly spent, Srila Prabhupada once corrected certain disciples who had not been very clear in their monetary dealings with him. He specified. The first point is if I send you money for a certain purpose, it must be spent for that purpose. Money for land must be spent for land purchase. If I send money for constructing of a kitchen, it must be spent for that. That will keep it very clear. And Srila Prabhupada specifically prescribed collecting for food relief, but using the funds for other purposes. Here are some quotes in that regard. We can collect a lot of money for ISKCON food relief program, but not a single farthing of that money should be used for any other thing. It should all go to our ISKCON food relief fund, nothing else. Another quote. Why is it that money that has been collected on behalf of ISKCON food relief program has not been sent to India? Where is that money? This is not good. If you are not intending to send for food distribution, then do not collect in the name of food relief. Even more vehemently, our occupation must be honest. Everyone should adore our members as honest. If we do something which is deteriorating to the popular sentiments of the public in favor of our movement, that is not good. Somehow or other, we should not become unpopular in the public eye. These dishonest methods must be stopped. It is hampering our reputation all over the world. Money collected for feeding people in India should be collected under the name ISKCON Food Relief, not any other name. And every farthing of that money must be sent to India, or better yet, buy food grains there and ship them here and we will distribute. But every farthing collected for that purpose must be used for that purpose. So that's very clear, especially in relation to collecting in the name of food relief and using it for something else. At the same time, some kind of diplomacy in the service of Krishna has been allowed by Srila Prabhupada, not just out of any whim, of course, but citing the behavior of the founding fathers of our sampradaya, the very greatest devotees, particularly the case of Ramananda Rai, the point of diplomacy in devotional service is mentioned, that he was being diplomatic with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to try to get Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to do something that Ramananda Rai thought it was best that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu should do, namely meet Maharaj Prataparudra, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't think was a good idea. How about that? You're with God directly and you have a different opinion and you behave diplomatically with Him. So does this give a license for devotees to deal diplomatically with devotees? Well, clearly not in the case of collecting in the name of food relief and using it for something else. But there may be other areas, there are instances of Srila Prabhupada himself doing so with devotees. For instance, I'll just say briefly, there was one devotee living in Mayapur who was very troublesome to everyone. And he liked to play a guitar, which was something else about him. And devotees were always complaining to Srila Prabhupada about him. And one day Srila Prabhupada called him and said, "Oh, you're a great guitar player. Why don't you go all over the world and play your guitar and sing about Krishna and preach in that way?" And the devotee left very happily, thinking he was getting Srila Prabhupada's blessing, which he was. But at the same time, Srila Prabhupada diplomatically got rid of him from Mayapur, which in blunt language. As the guru to his disciples, Srila Prabhupada could just tell them straightforwardly, you should do this, you should do that, don't do this, don't do that. But sometimes he dealt diplomatically, or we could put it another way, in a sensitive manner, understanding that devotees are at different levels and if you just try to force someone to do something which they're not fully ready for, then it may have the opposite effect of, instead of purifying them, they may become discouraged, and so on. And the biographers of Srila Prabhupada have observed that Srila Prabhupada, he would chastise devotees very strongly, but mostly it would only be those devotees who he trusted could take it in the right spirit. And with others he was more, we could say, diplomatic or sensitive, empathetic, if that's another word you want to use. So again, a guru doesn't have to. He can just say whatever he likes to his disciples, and they should be ready to accept it. But just as a matter of human behavior, we all do that. We all behave with people, well, hopefully we do. We don't try to always just tell people, you should do this, you should do that. But hopefully we should be more concerned with how they take it, and we should be concerned with how others will respond to it. That can be done diplomatically also, that someone pretends to be very nice to you because they want to get something out of you, or they want you to do something for them. There's a whole science of that which started with the first book in this genre, and there have been many since, how to win friends and influence people. The idea is that if you're nice to people, then they often want to help you. And then this way you can get ahead in life better than trying to bludgeon your way through. And possibly that could be good on a mundane platform also, that if you practice behaving nicely, even if you have the idea, what will I get from it, then maybe you'll develop some kind of niceness. And then this whole idea of how to get ahead by manipulating people, is that the right word? By being nice to them. That was brought to a higher level by Stephen Covey, in which he spoke about win-win deals. When you do win-win situations, you make an agreement with someone which is good for them and good for you, although the nature of the material world is that it's all lose-lose anyway, but even in many situations there's no win-win. Just like the parents of someone who killed their child want him executed, and the proponents of no capital punishment don't want him executed. There's no halfway in between. Either you kill him or you don't. So that's an example where you can't satisfy both. Anyway, diplomacy, if you want to call it that, dealing with devotees, that can be there also. Again, not in this situation where for money collection, but I'm just taking the subject, going deeper than that, because honesty is the best policy. It might not always be so. It's a general saying, but it may not always be so. If you're always completely honest, then it may be harmful for us, or it may inhibit, in certain circumstances, by being completely honest, it can inhibit our service to Krishna. To give an example that I've several times given, in certain countries that I used to travel to before we all got locked into the countries we're in, they're not very favorable to devotees. So I don't go dressed, when I'm traveling there, I don't go dressed in the kind of dress I'm dressed in now, but dress in standard secular dress, and if they ask me what I'm coming for, I'll say something, or just a visit, visiting friends, something like this. So, in one sense, it's not untrue, but there's a deliberate intent to mislead them. It's not the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth regarding my situation. But it's required for Krishna's service. What about dealing among devotees diplomatically? Well, there's a lot of that in management. There are different ideas about how we should serve Krishna, and you may make some deal with it. Classic that in leadership meetings, it's planned in advance. You vote for what I want and I'll vote for what you want. It may not be considering really the pros and cons of the situation, but you want to get your thing through. And the other thing you don't care about that much, whether it's right or wrong or it's the best thing to do. So this kind of diplomacy can come in. And management can tend toward politics. There shouldn't be politics among Vaishnavas, but practically speaking, we're dealing with so many matters concerning the material world, and there are different opinions about how to handle it all, which is why, in my humble opinion, it's better that management in general is done by Grihastha devotees rather than those in saffron. If you have to deal, if you feel you have to deal diplomatically. But then again, sometimes saffron-clad devotees are required to do management. So the world is very complex. Let's put it like this. It's not always so straightforward. Honesty is the best policy. We should always try and be straightforward with everyone, especially with devotees. But sometimes situations call for a different approach. Now, getting back to the point of collecting in the name of something and then using it for something else. That sometimes becomes necessary, or it's seen as necessary. I can cite from my own experience in purchasing land for farm projects. For one farm project, the land was found by a certain devotee, and he'd shown some ability in managing. So myself and others more or less just took his opinion that, okay, it's good for a farm community, so let's buy it. And then money was put into it, apart from the purchase of the land. And many devotees also contributed to that with the idea there'll be a farm project. Later it was seen that for various reasons, particularly due to lack of rainfall, or lack of sufficient water. It appeared at the time that land was being bought that there would be sufficient water, but later it was seen that it wasn't. There's talk of the state government bringing sufficient water there, but on further investigation, it seems that that may not happen. And there are other factors also. And on the whole, we can see that in retrospect, that wasn't a very good idea to buy the land there with the idea of making a farm community. So, therefore, we're shifting the project elsewhere. And some devotees who contributed for that project are okay with that. It's still not decided. It's quite possible we may continue something there. But that's another whole discussion. If not a farm project, then maybe something else. Most of the devotees who contributed for that, for building and this and that, they're understanding. Some have not been, and they're critical. Although the major donors, as often happens, the major donors, they're more understanding, and those who have given less are less understanding and very critical. So sometimes wrong decisions are made, which you find out in retrospect. Then, now if we're to start a project, not that we're in any big hurry to start any new ones just now, but we want to check very carefully, not just take one person's opinion, check very thoroughly. But then, for another piece of land in another state, one devotee was enthusiastic to purchase it, but I had others check, but they more or less took his opinion. And so I got the feedback that we can go. I think we can go ahead with it, which we did. And again, they're found to have some serious drawbacks with that particular piece of land. Not that we always make blunders, but we do have some good land and good projects going on. But bad decisions can be made, and in that case, devotees may complain that, well, we gave money for this project, but what's happening now? It's not going on. So sometimes some understanding is required also. In general, we shouldn't, as a policy, not in general, as a policy, we shouldn't try to hoodwink devotees to get donations, take donations for one thing and then do something else. That is a main point here. Diplomacy is required in some situations. Not that we just tell everyone that we see someone's not doing something properly and we just blast them every time and tell them they're a nonsense. They might be behaving in a nonsensical way, but we might tell them in a different way, because we're all conditioned souls. We all have our egos. Theoretically, in devotional service, we should be without ego, but practically we're not, so how to do it? So there are so many factors. Life is complicated. But anyway, on that particular point, it's very clear from Srila Prabhupada's instructions, we shouldn't collect in the name of food relief and use it for something else. And there are some other points which, in practical matters, what should we do, what should we not do? Well, some leaders take decisions by themselves and then they're very confident of their own decisions, but wiser is to discuss with others, get some feedback. It's also a great art to know who to consult with, and someone has to take some decisions ultimately, and sometimes the decisions, they don't work out the way we thought they would. So, Hare Krishna. Complexities, complexities, complexities. Life is full of complexities, but we can keep it more simple if we are simple. We don't unnecessarily try to mislead others, and people will trust us, hopefully. It will generate trust, and if we maintain that, it becomes easier to live in the world and deal with devotees. If devotees, if there's an atmosphere of distrust caused by dishonest dealings and unsympathetic dealings, then where's the Krishna consciousness? Hare Krishna. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada.